Kelly here from Blooming Supports. Welcome to episode 10 of Beyond Labels. Today we're talking to Lauren from Epilepsy WA, who will talk about everything epilepsy needs. It's a much watch. After watching, please reach out to any of us if you need any more information.
Hi everyone, welcome to our new episode of Beyond Labels, Blooming Supports podcast. Today, with me, I'll introduce first our Kelly, one of our support coordinators, and also I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Lauren. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming. You are from Epilepsy WA.
That's correct, yes.
So we're going to talk about a few things that are very, very important. And us as a provider of services, support work and community access and mentoring, there's a lot that needs to be taught to everyone. So we're very excited to hear from you. I will leave up to you to introduce yourself. You are a community coordinator.
That's correct, yes.
All right.
Yes. And this is my second time in Epilepsy WA. I worked there previously for 3.5 years, I think starting in 2018, and I couldn't stay away. So I've recently returned this year, and it's just such a delight to be back.
Yeah.
So in my role as community coordinator, I do things such as working on the support line and information line, as well as coordinating some of our support groups and providing support to the team as well.
All right. So what is the support line for?
Okay, so the Epilepsy WA support and information line, we are there to provide support to people who are living with a diagnosis of epilepsy, but probably the majority of our calls come from families and individuals who've recently been diagnosed, or they've recently experienced a seizure, or they suspect they might even be living with epilepsy themselves. So people mostly self-refer, and they're welcome to ring us, and hopefully we can offer them the support and information that makes that journey a little bit easier.
All right. So we're going to give out all the information how to contact you guys.
Great.
Phone number, website. You're easy to find on Google, but the information is going to be there for everyone.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
So, we were talking previously about how important it is for people that work with people with disabilities in general, how important it is to have training for epilepsy training, which, as I mentioned before, is a requirement, compulsory requirement for all our team.
Which I'm very glad to hear.
So, and we have Kelly as well that has lived experience with not epilepsy, but something very, very similar.
Yeah.
So we'll be asking questions. So the first thing is, Epilepsy WA have launched a new campaign.
Yes, we have. So we're quite excited. It's our new awareness and fundraising campaign. It's called Step for Epilepsy WA. And it runs for the month of September, and we're looking for people to register online and form a team, do some fundraising, and to try and take 10,000 steps a day. Obviously, being of healthy body and healthy mind can assist with the management of epilepsy, so we're very keen to advocate for that healthy lifestyle. But also, it's a way to bring the community together. So our aim is to try collectively to take as many steps as it would take to walk the entire, length of our state. So from Albany to Broome. So we've got a big target set, and we're very keen for people to help us do that. Yeah.
So awareness of epilepsy, or awareness how to deal with seizures, or how to attend?
The whole package. I guess one thing I want to make the point about epilepsy is it's a very misunderstood condition. For a start, the stats in terms of who lives with epilepsy, it's 1 in 25 people's lives will be impacted by epilepsy, which usually surprises people. The reality is that for around 70% of people living with epilepsy, they get good seizure control through medication, which is the primary form of treatment. So for those people, there's no obvious sign. And no one knows you live with epilepsy unless they see you experiencing a seizure. So for many people, they choose not to disclose for the simple reason that they are often met with stigma. There's questions about their employment. All of a sudden, employment becomes an issue. All sorts of things take place. If someone has has a seizure, there's a period in which they're not allowed to drive. So there is anywhere from 6 to 12 months, depending on what's happened in that experience. So it comes at a diagnosis is a significant event in a person's life. And so what we want to be doing is, I guess we call it bringing epilepsy out of the shadows, so that people can start to understand what it actually is, what it actually isn't. People right back in history, it's over 4,000 years old, epilepsy, in terms it's been talked about. And it was initially seen as being possession and those kind of things when associated with witchcraft. Yes, it was. My, how times have changed. But even now, it is still associated with intellectual difficulties and all sorts of things, which is incredibly unfair. So as I said, for the majority of people living with epilepsy, they can get on with their life just fine. For the 30% who don't get good seizure control, life is much, much more complicated.
So at that stage, does that become a disability rather than a medical condition, or where do we stand with the...
Yes, that is the challenge.
Line?
Yeah, and this is one of the conditions that's right on that grey line. And it's a challenge for a lot of people who live with the condition to try and get the support from agencies such as the NDIS, because they have to prove that their epilepsy is impacting on their ability to live their daily life. So in other words, a disability as such. And as I said, for the 70%, it's not an issue. But if we think about for those other 30%, there's things like, for example, other impacts. So we've got the not driving, like I mentioned. Fatigue is a huge issue, both from the disorder itself, but also medications. Mm-hmm. So as I said, anti-seizure medication is the primary treatment strategy. And the whole point of that medication is to slow the brain down. So epilepsy is a disorder characterised by seizures. A seizure occurs when the neurons in our brain fire at 5 to 6 times the normal rate. So they usually fire about 500 times a second. So then it's 5 to 6 times faster than that. And that results in a seizure. What I also want to clarify is that one seizure doesn't mean someone has epilepsy either. 1 in 10 of us will have a seizure in our lifetime. We all have a seizure threshold, so it's a possibility that you or I or anybody might experience one anyway. And I've lost my train of thought. I've got so much I want to share, and I don't know where I was going. Oh, I was talking about impacts, wasn't I?
Yes.
About why. Yes, so the anti-seizure medication, that's where I was going, was designed to sedate the brain, basically. So if you sedate the brain, you slow the brain. Mm-hmm. So if your brain is slow, you don't think as clearly. It's harder to learn new information. You feel sluggish. Your brain feels sluggish. So they're battling that on one side of the equation. But it's also things like stigma, like we talked about. It's issues with, as I mentioned, employment often becomes a little bit grey and a little bit murky. And I've got my cheat sheet here. Oh, yes, of course. But one of the most common impacts, and this is often where when we talk about looking at getting assistance, is that up to 50% of people will experience anxiety and depression as a result of their epilepsy. So very often the approach we have to getting support is one of looking at that psychosocial support side of things, because it's still a real grey area as to whether or not it's solely medical or it is a disability. Obviously for us, we could give you example after example of people whose lives are incredibly impacted by epilepsy, but trying to translate that to the worker at the NDIS who's looking at assessing a plan is a real challenge. But yes, so for some it's not an issue, but for those who have that epilepsy that isn't well managed by medication, it's a real concern.
So you mentioned that not everyone knows what epilepsy is.
No.
How would you describe or how would you explain to people in plain English?
Yeah. I mean, so really I would just simply say that epilepsy is a disorder of the brain in which a person experiences seizures. And that's pretty much it, which doesn't sound complicated. But then I go on to say that there's over 40 different types of seizures.
I was just going to ask that. How many seizures have we got and what do they look like?
Yeah, and there's a huge variant. So I know we mentioned training, and I really want to come back to that.
Yeah.
When we look at training and providing support to agencies, we cover, I guess, the most common seizures. So, for example, we have tonic-clonic seizures, which used to be called grand mal seizures. So, it's the International League Against Epilepsy who determines what seizures are called, and they're quite happy to change names, so it does get a little confusing sometimes. So, I'll try and use both names so people have an idea what I'm talking about. But the tonic-clonic seizure is the one in which a person will stiffen, then they will fall to the floor and convulse. So that's probably your stereotypical epilepsy sort of seizure. Yeah, which are incredibly scary to watch, absolutely. Then we have your absent seizures, which is probably the most common one that you might see in children, which is where it's like the lights are on and nobody's home. So they just sort of blank out, and it lasts about 15 to 20 seconds. And when they come to, they're not aware that they've had a seizure, and they will pick up exactly where they've left off. And I'm sure probably many of you will see that. We also manage things like what they call drop seizures, which probably you also would be familiar with. So in this case, they are the tonic seizures, in which someone goes very, very stiff and then falls like a plank forwards or backwards.
Yeah.
Or the atonic seizures, in which their muscles lose all tone and they will just crumple and hit the deck really hard. Yeah. And sometimes it's not the seizure that's the issue, it's the injuries that occur during the seizure that can be the most problematic. So I guess they're your more commonly known seizures. So and all those seizure types are known as what we call generalized seizures, so they involve the whole brain. There are seizures that are called focal seizures, which are ones that take place in one specific part of the brain. And depending on what part of the brain is being activated is going to determine how that seizure looks. So it's kind of hard to give you a classic example. Yeah. But some are things like focal seizures with awareness tend to take place down one side of the body. So the person might have some stiffening or twitching on one side, and that will be, but they won't lose awareness. And then the other side of the equation is the focal seizures with impaired awareness. And for those ones, you tend to see almost automatic movement. So people might roll their fingers, or they smack their lips, or they will play with their clothing. So they'll be moving. They might even be wandering around, but they're not aware of what's going on. So they are your classic seizures. But then again, like we said, there's 40. So there are gelastic seizures in which someone will either laugh uncontrollably or cry uncontrollably. Which is when you think there's no trigger for that, in terms of there's nothing happening around you. Imagine just bursting into laughter for no reason, apparent reason, in a supermarket, or crying uncontrollably when you're somewhere that you're supposed to be happy. So it's a huge length and breadth, and every seizure has the own individual's flavour, because every brain is individual.
Exactly.
So it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. But ultimately, the short answer is it's characterised by seizures. But you need to, particularly for those who work and care for those living with epilepsy, you really need to understand and know that person's seizures. It's not enough just to say this person has seizures. What we really encourage you to do is have solid epilepsy management plans that actually tell you not just what to do, but what to look for when a seizure happens.
Regarding the seizure management plan, how often should it be updated? Is there a line time or?
Brilliant question. Yes, we suggest annually. So, however, if the person's epilepsy seems to shift or change, or their seizure type differs, that's again when you update it. And we strongly advocate that each epilepsy management plan is signed off by a treating doctor. That gives either, whether it's teachers at school or care agencies, that peace of mind that this is exactly what this person needs when a seizure takes place. The other interesting fact too is that, particularly I think for those who work in disability, is that there's they say 1 in 4 people with an intellectual disability will also be living with epilepsy. So it's quite a high comorbidity in that area as well.
Yeah. So it's interesting because then you start learning that not everyone that has epilepsy also has an intellectual disability.
Absolutely.
It's just the effects of the medication that may
Possibly.
help someone to look like they have an intellectual disability. So, but look, I'm all for you disclose your diagnosis or your disability, your health condition whenever it affects you. But in that case, when someone is working and it only has epilepsy, it's really important that at least one person at your workplace knows about it and has training.
Yeah.
Because that's the importance of training, because it can save someone's life.
Absolutely.
So coming back to the training, if there's a health plan put in place, like to the schools, is there supporting education, training, that sort of stuff for people at the school?
Yeah, we provide training for schools and families as well. So we've got two, courses that we do. So one is the Exploring Epilepsy and Seizure First Aid, in which we give a broad overview so that people doing the course have an understanding of what epilepsy is, some of the key triggers, which is something I'd love to discuss as well as seizure types and those kinds of things. And then also we then look at the seizure first aid, so what to do if someone has a seizure. And the question most commonly asked is, when do I call an ambulance?
I was just going to ask that. When's the best time to call it? Especially if you haven't got a diagnosis and you're having regular seizures.
Yeah, so we'll discuss that. And then the other side, the other training that we do is for those individuals who are on emergency medication. So sometimes there is a risk for some people to go into what's called status epilepticus, in which the brain gets stuck in that permanent seizure state, which actually can lead to death. So some people are prescribed midazolam, is usually the common one, but there are other ones that is administered at a specific point to try and arrest that seizure activity. And obviously you know that well. So we provide training in how to administer that, understanding the nature of the medication, because it's a significant drug. And we give them physical practice, so you know what it's like to open an ampule, you know what it's going to feel like, because obviously we can have all the theoretical training in the world, but when you're in that state, and as you said, it's pretty challenging to watch and be a part of, and scary. Absolutely. You want to think that at least I've done this before, I can do this, because it can be a little fiddly. But yeah, so coming back, we in terms of, should we run through some seizure first aid principles? Because what I really want to stress to people is, I think sometimes they think they have to do something, when in actual fact most seizures are self-resolving. So most seizures start and end whenever they like. There's nothing that the individual can do about it, but aside from administering that emergency medication, as we talked about. So the seizure will resolve, and it's going to feel like it goes forever. It doesn't. It does. But it does feel like it goes forever. It absolutely does. And it does. But most of the time that seizure is going to self-resolve. And I think it's so important for people to recognise that, because often what they want to do is intervene, and, people might want to, hold people down, or please tell me, you don't think you put things in anybody's mouth, because that used to be the old wives' tale that you put something in the mouth because they might, bite their tongue or whatever. Please don't do that. So the aspects of seizure first aid that we really want to promote is, first of all, the timing. So note the time the seizure starts, note the time the seizure ends, so you have an idea, and that'll come into play in a moment. But also, if you do call an ambulance or you do administer emergency medication, then that also needs to be noted. Then what we need to do is we need to keep the person safe, so protect the head. Certainly for something like a tonic-clonic seizure, where the head might be banging on the ground or they might be banging against a piece of furniture, it's just clear a safe space for them, so they're not in any chance of injuring themselves. And if you can, pop something soft under the head, a jacket, a jumper, anything you can find. Anything's going to be better than obviously smacking your head on the
so it's okay to move the head to put that pillow
absolutely
under.
Really important. And then what we want you to do is, as I said, please don't restrain them. So if they're lying down, allow the seizure. It's going to be actually really hard if they're having a tonic-clonic seizure to try and move them anyway, so just allow the seizure to run its path. If they're wandering, so I mentioned those focal seizures with impaired awareness, don't restrain them, try and guide them, if that makes sense. Maybe have your hands either side, so there's just a gentle touch that sort of guides them out of the way of obstacles. The brain is an amazing thing, and if you try and restrain them, they're going to respond with aggression, because it's that fight or flight response. So it's really important that we just gently guide. The reason we say don't put anything in the mouth, I mean, there's obviously lots of reasons, things like, we don't want to aspirate or anything like that. But the reality is that in the tonic-clonic phase, as I mentioned, it starts with tonic where muscles tighten it. If your hand is anywhere near their mouth when that phase kicks in, they will bite down.
Yeah.
And you will not be able to get your fingers out until that seizure ends. So it's as much for the safety of the person providing first aid and support as it is for the individual as well, obviously. And the other thing we want to suggest is just stay with them. Don't walk away. And I guess that's by we're wanting to reassure you that you're not called on to great heroics. What you're called on is to keep them safe and to support them. I mean, we really encourage you to talk to them, reassure them throughout. We don't know what someone can hear during a seizure, but ideally when they come out of their seizure, what they're going to want to hear is a voice telling them it's okay. You're not on your own. I'm here. It's going to be fine. That soothing, relaxing space. The last thing they want to hear is crying and wailing and gnashing of teeth. So, staying with them is really important. If they have had a tonic-clonic seizure, once the seizure subsides, please do get them into the recovery position. But for most of the other seizures, that's not required, unless, of course, they've injured themselves. So let's say they've had a drop seizure and they've hit the floor and there's a problem. Try and get into that recovery position is important, and keeping an eye on that breathing as well, because obviously, that can be an issue in some seizure recovery. So that's, I guess, is the short of what seizure first aid is. It's not as scary as people think. It's about keeping them safe, and it's about reassuring and staying with them.
And then when do you call an ambulance?
Exactly what I was going to
Yeah, that's all good.
That is something that I remember from the training really caught my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So first rule of thumb, we mentioned timing. And if the seizure goes for longer than 5 minutes, that's the general rule, is that if it hits that 5-minute mark, that's when you call an ambulance, because there's something else going on here. It's not your standard seizure. So that's the first point. 5 minutes is your hit the emergency button mark. If the seizure takes place in water, or if they were eating and drinking, again, we suggest that you call an ambulance, simply because of the potential for aspiration and possibly choking, but particularly aspiration, which can lead to significant pneumonia and all sorts of things like that. If the person's pregnant or has diabetes, then yes, you would call an ambulance. But and I know this is a little, I say contentious, it's not contentious, the point, but for those people who do live with epilepsy, as you mentioned, it's quite frustrating that I don't need an ambulance, but someone comes across me and calls an ambulance. But the reality is that if you don't know the person, or if you do and it's their first seizure, or if they don't have an epilepsy management plan, then I would still suggest that you call an ambulance. You're not going to ever regret saving. You're never going to regret calling an ambulance.
No.
Also, if the person has breathing issues. So if their respiration is not returning to normal, because there is a period during tonic-clonic seizures where everything tightens up and they don't breathe. But that obviously should start to resume, and if it doesn't, they're definitely going to need assistance. If they've hurt themselves, so they, obviously I know you would anyway, but that's quite obvious. But to be honest with you, I think the best advice I can say is go with your gut. If you think there's something wrong, if they don't look right, if something's different this time as opposed to last time, just do that. And to reassure people again is that the beauty of it is that if you do call an ambulance, they stay with you on the phone. They will talk you through what to do. You will get the support that you need. But as I said, you're never going to regret calling for one, but you might regret not doing so.
Yeah. So you mentioned school training or training for the schools.
Yeah.
Is that a services that you Epilepsy WA provides?
Yes.
Is it free?
No, it isn't free.
Right.
As much as we would love it to be, we get minimal government funding, so we rely very much on the generosity of WA. So no, we do charge for our training, but all our training we do have hardship requests and things, and we're quite flexible because we don't want costs to be prohibitive. But we have a team of epilepsy nurses that are all trained and will go out to schools and provide that training and support. And we do the same for support agencies as well. We train up support agencies, and as I mentioned, we also train families, basically anybody. If you want training, we can do it. And it would be our pleasure to do it.
Yeah, and it's so important.
It's
It's so important, and you know, sometimes surprise me that not all the support workers are required to have epilepsy training.
Absolutely. It's horrifying, to be honest, because as we said, you know, anybody can experience a seizure, whether it's known or it's not.
Exactly.
And I think it's such an important life skill. And I'll ask you a little quiz question. What age group do you think has the highest rate of new diagnoses for epilepsy?
Teenagers?
Teenagers, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd probably go teenagers as well.
It's actually over 60s.
Oh, there you go. And is that because it's connected to other health conditions?
Can be, yeah.
So it's a secondary?
Absolutely, it can be, certainly. I mean, things like ageing brains can be the result of stroke, linked to Parkinson's, all kinds of things. But it's our over 60s. And we all have parents. We all have maybe older siblings. We all have older, neighbours. So it's so important that everybody knows what to do if someone experiences a seizure.
Yeah, because we do find in the industry that there's a lot of epilepsy as second diagnosis.
Yes.
So it's, along with the normal disability, knowing that there's seizures and epilepsy, well, not necessarily epilepsy, but seizures side of things is sitting in the background as well.
Absolutely. And we talk about, I mentioned triggers earlier, so some of the key triggers are things like stress. That's the most commonly reported trigger by our community is increasing stress and pressure. Things like missed medications, and it's really important, and I'm sure those of your team already know, epilepsy medication usually is taken twice a day at the same time each day, so 7 and 7 or 8 and 8. It doesn't hang around, so we want to try and make sure we maintain those levels of in the brain, so it has to be taken consistently, and it has to be taken regularly.
How many epilepsy medications are there?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
They're constantly in development, every now and then a new one pops up. And what medication someone is prescribed is also dependent on the nature of the epilepsy that they have and the seizures they experience. So yes, there's I couldn't give you an exact number. But other things include lack of sleep. Sleep is really important. And those that are tired are often more prone to having seizures. Interestingly enough, I'll ask you another quiz question. What percentage of people do you think are triggered, or their seizures are triggered by flashing lights, which everyone knows is a key, Everyone knows the flashing lights trigger epilepsy and those that live with it. So tell me, what percentage of people living with epilepsy do you think are triggered by flashing lights?
62.
62? Well, that's a very precise number. I like it. Well done. I love that.
40%?
3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Yeah, it's actually really quite rare, but it's so well known. I think because it's one that can be controlled, if that makes sense. Stress is subjective, sleep's subjective, but we can all know that some people with flashing lights, will result in a seizure, so that's why you get it plastered across movies and things, and that's great, but it's not the most common seizure trigger. Yeah.
So, having seizures when you're asleep.
Yes.
As a mum,
Yes.
I will be terrified
Yes.
if, I know that my child can have a seizure. Well, I might sleep up. I wouldn't sleep. I mean,
Yes, it's very commonly heard from the mums that ring us, absolutely.
Is there any device, any alarm, anything that...
Oh yeah, there is. Epilepsy WA actually has one of the, if not the largest display of seizure alert devices in Australia. It's something we're incredibly passionate about. So we actually also have a loan program for children and for adults as well. in which we loan out for a period of a month particular seizure alert devices so that you can try before you buy, I guess. So, you know, people can, because obviously there is a cost, so you want to know it's going to suit your family. So yes, over night time, there's a couple of devices. There's a mat that goes either underneath or on top of your mattress that is activated by rapid convulsive movements. There is also a device that can be worn, the night watch, which not only detects movement but also detects heart rate. And we loan out both of these devices to the community, to our members. It's a perk of membership. It's for free. So you can trial these. Yep, you can trial these devices. Absolutely. So there is opportunities to give people that peace of mind. Unfortunately, most of the technology is based around movement. So if you have, say, for example, tonic seizures, which can be common at night, which is that stiffening, some of the devices are not going to pick that up. But a device like the night watch, which monitors heart rate, might. I mean, they don't say it will, but obviously if the heart rate changes, you're going to get an alert. So both these devices have alarms that go off and alert you to the fact that something is not right. And there are other devices that can be worn on the wrist. So it just depends how, again though, they're for convulsive movements. But there is all ever-changing technologies, and it's a real area of growth and development. And anything we can do to save lives is hugely important, I think. Yeah.
Is it true that sleep studies are the main way to find out what your diagnosis is?
Main way epilepsy is diagnosed is through EEGs.
Okay.
So they'll have an EEG, and that will indicate that there's an abnormal pattern. Some people, however, have normal EEGs until they're not, which makes diagnosis a lot harder, and it has to be subjective. It has to be based on reporting. Parents are often asked can you videotape it, which to a parent feels terrible. But at the same time, sometimes that's the only evidence they've got to show what's going on for their child. So sleep studies can show certainly nocturnal epilepsy, if that's the case, but ideally an EEG is what you want.
So with those devices, alarm devices, does the Apple Watch work for seizures?
It can. What we suggest is there are apps that can be added to the Apple Watch or the smartwatches. So we've got some of those. If you look on our website, we've got our seizure alert booklet, and there are a couple of apps that can be added that will turn that into a seizure alert device. The standard Apple Watch will detect a fall and things like that, but ideally we don't think it's enough. There should be an additional app that again will detect either the fall or the convulsive seizures types. So it's certainly an option if you've got one already. With most of the devices like the apps or anything wearable, there is a subscription fee, so you'll purchase the device, like for example Embrace Watch, which people wear, but then there's a subscription fee, so that's important for people to recognise, and then that usually increases based on how many people you want to alert at the time.
Is that subsidised by the government?
No. People tend to find they'll be subsidised for the purchase of the watch, but because it's an ongoing fee, the subscription is not.
Okay, so I just want to make this clear because, people who are at risk of falling use the Apple Watch, and it's really good.
Yes.
So we want to give the right information. You would not 100% recommend an Apple Watch for seizures, but you will recommend the device that you guys have.
Yes, but we do recommend an Apple Watch. We just recommend that they add the app to it. The proper app to it. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's people do just use the device, but it's going to pick up, as I said, it'll pick up the fall. Right. So if someone's in bed, if someone's sitting in a chair, it's not going to detect it because they don't fall. So the addition of that app is what's going to ensure that those convulsive seizures are identified and picked up.
And what are those apps?
They are app stores. So what are they? Sorry. So we're aware of one. There's Inspire, there is Seize Alarm, and there is, I think it's My Medic Watch Go. I think of the three. Oh, that was good. They came out of, they're the ones that we have on it in our seizure alert book that you can find. Yeah.
All right. So I'm guessing that all the information is No, I'm guessing. I checked their website and I know it's there.
It is there.
Yeah.
And if people do want to come and have a look at these devices, they are welcome to make an appointment and come into our office. While we always welcome drop-ins, just to make sure we're only a little team. So to make sure that someone's there, we prefer it if people just give us a call and make an appointment. They can come in and see, look at what the devices look like, look at what they feel like. As I said, they can then arrange to loan both of our nocturnal, either or of our nocturnal devices. And we also actually have a large display of head protection as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, which is another area that I'm really into looking at the moment and updating into head protection for people who experience seizures.
And do you have therapists within your office if we had to do prescriptions and that sort of stuff of equipment from an NDIS point of view?
That's the only equipment we provide, and the helmets don't require prescription. I am an OT, so it's me that oversees that.
Yep.
But none of the devices specifically require a prescription. To get them through NDIS, you'd need a letter saying this is recommended and a letter of support. But it does give you the opportunity. As I said, our collection is not full. I've just put in a huge wish list of all these new helmets and things that I've found. But we do have some that people can at least see and try. Because obviously, you don't want them to look... I mean, some of them look very much like what they are, which is a helmet. And that's brilliant and it does what it does. But not everybody wants to look like they're wearing a helmet. So we've got other options as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we help support someone that wears a sort of a bunny on top. And the helmet is actually pretty cool.
Yes.
And he needs it.
Yes, absolutely.
He needs it.
I mean, to be perfectly safe, the ideal helmet for someone living with epilepsy who experiences some kind of seizure in which they fall is actually a hockey helmet. But it's not very comfortable to wear, but it provides the grill. So this is ice hockey, sorry. So there's the grill, so that protects the face, goes down low at the back and low at the front because it protects all the areas. Yeah. So, if you just want one that's easy to get, that's the one to get. But as we said, it's not particularly comfortable, nor is it subtle.
No, not very sociable, is it?
No, but that would give you that full protection that you need. And for some people, that's what they need because their seizures are so frequent, and the risk of injury is so great.
Yeah.
But that would be what you look at.
So for parents, when you have young children, and you don't know, start looking for answers. If something happens or you are under the impression your child has had a seizure.
Yes.
What's the best path to follow?
Yeah, a really good question again. I think always emergency room. If they've had a seizure, I don't think you can afford to mess about with that. Either call an ambulance or take them to ED. People's experiences there are varied, many and varied, as I said. One seizure does not result necessarily in an epilepsy diagnosis, so sometimes it might take a second visit for them to recognise that this is actually something that needs follow-up and treatment. We provide, obviously they can go through the public system. We have a list in our office of all the neurologists in Perth, and we're happy to provide them that as well. Obviously we can't make recommendations, but we can certainly provide them with information if they want to take that step of going through having a private neurologist look after them as well.
Oh, I would love that list.
Yeah,
to put it in this podcast or in the comments.
Yeah, sure.
And our Facebook page, because specialists are ready to come by with appointments.
It's so difficult. It is so difficult, and that's often I think. We would love to be able to go, yes, call us and we'll find your appointment. We can't do that, but at least we can point you in the right direction. And we always suggest that the best way to do it is to do the legwork. So ring around first, find out the ones that have got the shortest wait time, then get your referral,
Exactly.
Because otherwise you're back and forward. Like if your GP doesn't give you a general referral, you're back and forward. Correct. Like a yo-yo. But also I really recommend, we talk about, for new parents, and, we've had people ring up recently with 8-week-old babies having seizures, which is just devastating for them, and it's hard for us to hear as well. But giving us a call, and things like we said, the MAT loan program, that MAT can work from infants. Yeah. So, even just temporarily until things settle, you can loan a MAT. We also have support groups. that we run. We run 6 support groups each month that are free to attend, and we provide a light lunch or cup of tea depending on during the day. We have them at various locations. We also have an online one for those who can't make it as well.
That's important.
Yeah. It's so important.
And that's for all ages and stages.
All ages and stages. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where did you run them?
So we run one in Joondalup, one in Armidale, one in Midland, one in Bunbury, one online, and one at our central office in Nedlands. So we try and spread it out as much as we can, and they all take place on a Thursday, usually from 12 to 1:30. And on our website we have all the list of times and things, and all the dates for the year as well. But everyone is welcome. Anyone whose life is impacted by epilepsy is welcome, and it's just a chance to meet others, have your questions answered, and just share time with other people who really understand and who really get it.
And even for people who wants to learn.
Absolutely. And people who have a new diagnosis or their child has a new diagnosis, they have so many questions.
Oh, yes.
And that's what we're there for. Is that specialists are fabulous and do such a good job, but they don't always have time. So we can give you those that little bit of extra time to have to answer the questions and help you with your concerns. We also have things like for our members, we have a children's book library all about epilepsy. So if they've got young children or they have siblings, they can borrow books, and it opens up that conversation within the family. Kids can take a book to school, all those kind of things, just to try and work on supporting the family and the individual, but also supporting the community. So for that child who might experience a seizure at school, if his friends understand what that's about, that makes all the difference.
Oh, it does.
Education's huge.
It really
is. Exactly. And I've got I'm an oncology mum, right? So when Martin finished treatment, chemotherapy, he looked different to how the kids used to know him. So they Camp Quality, which is a charity group, went to school and with puppets explained to the kids.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah.
Everything, and they had the chance to ask questions and just take the taboo of talking about cancer in childhood. And it was brilliant. It was brilliant because kids learn, ask questions, and then if a family member, which is something that happened, a family member had cancer, one of the mum told me, look, because of this and someone in the family, very dear, had cancer, our little girl said, well, Martin is fine, so my Nana will be fine.
Beautiful.
And, if someone I had a schoolmate that had epilepsy, but I was 7.
Yes.
It was terrifying.
Yes.
And back then, not that much longer. You didn't
Year or two ago only, that's fine, yeah.
You didn't have all the information. So now we have the information. Yeah. We have you guys that can go to school and explain to everyone, especially the children, and that is what inclusion is about. You get the kids to understand what's going on, what could happen, and then it's fine. I mean, because if the kids know, they're gonna include them.
Absolutely.
And then hiding the diagnosis would not be necessary.
Yes.
And it's just that kind of education at young age.
And it is about inclusivity, and you're so right. And one of the other services we have a gorgeous volunteer, Hayley, who I can't speak highly enough of, and she has lived experience with epilepsy, and once a week she is part of our compassionate ear listening service where people can just ring up and talk to someone who's walked the walk. She's not there to she actually does have a diploma in counselling, which we're very proud of. She's like I said, she's just amazing. But she's there not in that realness per se, but just to talk to someone who's lived it. Then she can always refer to us at the support team for the nitty gritty stuff. But there's a voice that they can talk to who absolutely knows what it is.
I think it's easy if you've, and it's lived experience, if you've actually got a diagnosis.
Yeah.
We took many years to get a diagnosis, and until we did, it was just a trip to the hospital. And having the support around the families and the schools, knowing what to do was number one to us.
Absolutely.
And now, my daughter has been diagnosed with narcolepsy.
Okay, right.
At a later age, because we got sent to a lot of other departments to find out what was going on. And now she's a mother, a full-time employee with heavy diesel mechanics. So I suppose my little message is never give up until you've got a diagnosis.
Absolutely.
Although it's hard,
Yes.
keep going.
And we're here for that. You don't need a diagnosis. I have people ring up who say to me, I think I might be having seizures. What do you think? And our arms are open, and our ears and our hearts are open.
I wish I knew that
a
few years ago.
Exactly. And that's the purpose of this podcast. To give that
absolutely.
information to everyone. There's someone like you looking for, answers. There's always someone to answer that question.
And if we don't have an answer, and we're not doctors, so you might have rung and we wouldn't be able to say what the issue was, but we will certainly point you in the right direction of maybe where to find some answers. And in the short term, you can just talk with someone who's there to, who genuinely cares. Our business hours are 9 to 5, and there's always someone in the office available when someone rings. So that's what we're there for, and most of the team does have a lived experience in one way or another. Our CEO's niece experienced a stroke and now has seizures, so a lot of us have sort of, whether on the periphery or personally, have walked that walk as well, and we know how important it is to have someone pick up a phone,
absolutely,
and empathise.
So you mentioned that you don't need a diagnosis.
No, if you just think you're experiencing seizures, just give us a ring.
Do you know anything about misdiagnosis? Because that is very common.
Yep.
Unfortunately, especially in children, my child was misdiagnosed for like nearly 7 months.
Yeah.
So if the parents think that, because as a mom, you follow your guts.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can reach out. They can.
Yes, they can, and they can say, "This is what it looks like. Does this sound like a seizure?" And we'll give you your honest opinion. I mean, as I said, we haven't seen it. We're not doctors, but people can always call and ask the question and say, "Look, this is happening. Does that sound like a seizure?" And we can, send them through some information, and they can have a look and say, "Yep, this sounds familiar," or "This doesn't sound familiar." I think, we talked about recording. I think that's always powerful and really important. Getting some evidence to take to practitioners and to specialists. I think because sometimes that's where your answers come from. It's really, anything with the brain is complicated, and there is something called functional neurological disorder. Which FND, which obviously you've heard about. Yep. Part of which does come. There are what they used to be called psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. So basically, the person experiences a seizure, but the EEG, if they were hooked up, would be completely normal. And that's very difficult to diagnose. And for all intents and purposes, that person is experiencing a seizure, and it's our job to validate that and empathise with that, and then look at, because the path for that sort of treatment strategies is a combination of both neurology and psychology, for example, or psychiatry or what have you. But that certainly muddies the waters, that sort of thing, and it's not uncommon. I've been doing some reading for people who actually have a diagnosis of epilepsy to also have some psychogenic seizures. So it's the brain is so complex. I don't think you can ever rule anything out, can you? Really?
So, Kelly, how? Because I want to do a podcast episode with siblings.
Yes, apps.
They are
so important.
Every time, and they are left behind, not because you want to, but because you have to do what you need to do. So how did it impact?
Oh, it was massive. So we just moved over from New Zealand. So I had no supports, nothing. So I'm very, very grateful to those couple of parents that jumped in that were friends of the other sibling. But you just got to go with your gut feeling. And it's hours and hours in the hospital, you know, and sometimes you come away with no diagnosis.
Absolutely.
You wait for the next one, no diagnosis. Wait for the next one, no diagnosis. And I say, you know, we get episodes that once you get to the hospital, you've got nothing to show for. You know, ambulance turns up, get to the hospital, nothing. So you get sent home, you know, until you get to that 16-year age and you get sent to senior medication, and that's where we got picked up.
Wow.
So 11 years until we sort of had a temporary diagnosis, and then 11 years later an actual diagnosis, which has changed the world because I don't have to worry anymore.
No, that's right.
It's huge. You know, she can live a normal life now. But yeah, impact wise, it's massive, and you do need the supports around you, and you do need to reach out. So Epilepsy WA, everybody reach
as
out.
I said, absolutely, and siblings are welcome at our groups and encouraged.
Do you have any support group for siblings?
Yeah,
Not specifically, no. Unfortunately, at the moment, as I said, when we have a big reach, but we're quite little. So, believe me, we have grand plans. We have grand plans of world domination. But there are some logistical limitations at this point in time. But no, we are very aware of that. And I think that's where the book library comes into play, which is so good about giving answers to siblings, you know, and creating that sense of understanding and empathy, because you're right, it's really difficult to be the sibling of someone who, you know, is living with the condition. I know that, and I guess this is cross-promotion, but I know that Carers WA does have a young carers support group, and I think that's really important that it acknowledges the role that siblings can play as well as being a young carer. So there is supports available, and we often refer people through to them, which is really important, I think.
Of course, I mean, watching someone having a seizure, you know, is scary for an adult. Let alone your brother, sister, watching you have a seizure, passing out.
Yeah, so the youngest sister won't go near hospitals anymore, won't go near an ambulance, because my daughter would pass out. She wouldn't seizure, but she'd pass out cold for 5 hours at a time.
Wow.
So 5 hours of your sister not talking to you, not seeing you, not knowing whether she's even going to wake up. So she's very scared of the hospital now, scared of doctors, scared of everything. Where the older sister sort of pulled it all together, and you know, she was the one that kept it all going.
I think older siblings are like that, though. Aren't they? I'm an oldest child, so totally like that.
So it is. It is a partnership, I suppose, with everybody involved.
It is.
But knowing that there are supports there,
knowing
now that there's supports there,
and we have our in March we have our Purple Day walk, and that's just wonderful. You know, where all the whole families come, and everyone. The first walk was always led off by the Perth pipe band, and I can't hear a bagpipe without crying. So it's a very emotional moment. We all do this lap together, and some people do laps and walk consistently, but it's very much a day of community, you know, and of recognition of families and support for families and things like that.
So question, is it family related? So does epilepsy have to come through the
it's interesting. 40% of people will never know why them. So, you know,
so there's no real connection.
There can be. There can be. I spoke to someone the other day who was one of 8 siblings, and 6 had epilepsy.
Yeah, okay.
However, there are others where it just appears. Sometimes it's for some who have a more significant disability, it might be a genetic or a chromosomal issue. But yes, there can be familial links. It can be, but it can be also, you know, genetics that have just not quite gone the way they should. But yes, I said a large part of people will never know why them. You know, which I think makes it terribly difficult, you know. And those that do know, usually it's in the form of they've had some kind of head injury or, you know, something along those lines, where otherwise nearly half won't know why. So
the lucky ones. The lucky ones.
And you know, and so you think about something that can have such a significant impact on the life of an individual and a family, and to not know why, you know. And for parents, there's a whole lot of anxiety about what did I do wrong. and the reality is nothing.
Exactly.
But
Right.
if you're a parent and a mum particularly, oh yeah, it's always us.
Yes.
Because it's our job to keep things safe and it's our job to make things right. And when you can't influence like you want to, there's nothing like that feeling of helplessness. And I guess that's what we can provide. And the most powerful question I can ask someone ringing, and often it is mum, but sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes it's a friend, is ask them how they are. And that's the other thing we really advocate for is support, putting people in the path of supports for them, for parents and carers as well. That's why our support groups are so important. But that simple question, how are you, often brings people to tears because nobody thinks to ask.
Exactly.
And it's such an important question. And so, we're really keen to try and support the family as much as we can, the whole structure around the individual. Because I think it outcomes are so much better when everybody's strong.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, and bringing the community together.
Yeah.
It takes a village, they say.
It sure does.
And it does, especially, in what you're doing, because you rely so heavily in WA people.
Yeah, we do.
So, and it's important that everyone knows how to donate, how to,
Take part in our fundraisers.
Awareness, fundraisers, and
absolutely, yeah. And we're always encouraging schools to do, the Purple Days, to bring epilepsy awareness into schools. We do have our events like the Step for Epilepsy WA or Purple Walk, but people can go on our website and donate anytime they like, and we're always exceedingly grateful for them doing that. But it is, and Epilepsy WA has been part of the community for over 60 years. So we started in 1963. So we've been here a long time, and we're proudly and fiercely WA. We've recently sort of developed our own training programs that are WA specific, and we're very much about the WA community, and we're here for them.
Oh, that's good. So, for training,
Yes.
They reach to you.
Yeah, and there's a couple of options. You can do it online, so you just go to our website and there's a link to training, and you can then and there register and off you go. Otherwise, you can call our office, and particularly if you want to arrange for group training and those kinds of things, and face-to-face training, because we do provide it online and face-to-face to suit everybody's needs. But yes, and it's just a matter of giving us a call and off we go. As I said, we've got lots of nurses that are available to do it, and I myself, I can't run the medication sessions, but I run the information and education sessions in terms of general epilepsy, and it's such a pleasure to do. It's sharing that information and things is always, and it's such a, I love, like I joke about asking you those quiz questions, but I think it's a way to get people to really think about what's actually happening and the reality of what epilepsy is and all those kinds of things. So yes, please just give us a call or jump on our website. We're happy to help.
So besides the walk and step and the Purple Walk, is there any other main fundraising event throughout the year?
They're the two at the moment. What we also do is we do obviously encourage, like I said, if people want to hold morning teas or anything along those, we don't mind. What we, as I said, there's no denying, we really need that fundraising dollar so we can continue our vital services. But to us, this is much about expanding awareness, changing attitudes, letting people know the reality of what it is to live with epilepsy. But the next one, as we said, is September, which is Step for Epilepsy WA. And if you go to our Facebook page or any of our social media, you can see some terribly embarrassing videos of me. Everyone else looks great. I look at mine and go, what was I thinking?
Don't be too critical. You look fine.
And you'll get lots of information about that. But it's, we're really quite excited about it. I teach Zumba, so I'm going to have to put my Step for Epilepsy t-shirt on and get out there and do a couple of, shots of me teaching my Zumba in my shirt, because that's the only way I'm going to get my 10,000 in, I think. But it's just Epilepsy WA has such a special place in the community, and it's something that we treasure and we're incredibly proud of. And we're incredibly proud to be part of the WA community as a whole, but also the community of those who are living with this misunderstood condition.
Exactly. So I've seen people having seizures. and it's scary.
Yes.
But when you have the training,
Yep.
you can manage.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's so important. So that's why we're going to put in our now all the information,
Fabulous.
way they can reach to you, and about the fundraising coming.
Yeah,
We're gonna
perfect.
all that information in our Facebook page, in
The
our
whole lot.
website, and invite everyone to donate, because what you do, save lives.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for acknowledging that, because it does. And I should probably prompt and say that we actually have a prize for our Step for Epilepsy WA. The highest fundraiser wins a trip to Broome.
Oh,
nice.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So hello.
You should have said
Said that at the start. Got to be in at the end.
So, yeah, thank you. I want to thank you for coming. I mean, it's
pleasure.
very, very important to get this information out.
I absolutely agree.
It
Yeah.
not only for people that has a loved one that has epilepsy, but for everyone, because
Absolutely. You don't know.
find you're in a situation where you can save someone's life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, any last words?
No, just thank you, and I wish I knew about you a few years ago.
But I want to say thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for this opportunity to share about epilepsy and Epilepsy WA. It's a real privilege. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome,
Thank you.
and we're happy to share this information. I think, for me, is information and knowledge is power, and that's
agree.
how we give power to the people. Just
Absolutely.
giving the information, putting the information out. So
Absolutely right.
I hope all your donations, increase.
Be wonderful.
And yeah, so start raising awareness and talk about epilepsy is,
Have that conversation
Exactly.
and bring it out of the
Absolutely.
shadows, as we said. It's not something, we don't want it to be something of shame, because it isn't, and we want it to be part of the everyday conversation.
Exactly. So thank you so much, everyone. I know that this information is really, really valuable. So share it, start the conversation, teach your children, and donate. Be part of the fundraising and support Epilepsy WA.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Excellent.
See ya. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.